Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. This is the first time we've had a sibling of a previous guest on, and his name is Arel Avellino. He is a serial entrepreneur who has led both marketing and operations at Passage. Arel is a storyteller, problem solver, and gamification nerd with experience spanning film, e-commerce, and blockchain. His brother was on episode 101, How to Be a Christian in the Digital Space, his brother Lex. And we're excited to have you on. You were homeschooled and you didn't go the college route. You just went straight into building businesses. So, Arel, just tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to start a company.
Yeah. So that was a good summation. It's been a long time trying to figure out even how to explain to somebody what I do. It's probably one of the nightmare questions that my wife gets is like, hey, what's your husband do? She can't really say like anything super easy. So, yeah, basically directly out of high school, I started making businesses because the first thing I wanted to get into was film, and all the people who were advising me at the time were basically saying, yeah, there isn't really like a degree that gets you into being a filmmaker. It's more, what have you created? And then, based on that, people start hiring you for stuff. So I went that route. I started just making stuff as quickly as I could, which really taught me like what it looks like to be an entrepreneur. What does it look like to kind of work for yourself? There are times when I kind of wish I had done maybe a more traditional job to like learn a couple of things that I kind of had to learn the hard way, just going directly into business. But it's also taught me kind of a little bit of a unique skill set, which is just always taking ownership of any problem that's currently in front of me. Because if there's a problem, I can't just be like, yeah, it's my boss's problem. No, it's my problem. And so I always have to figure out, okay, well, what's the next job coming up? What's the next source of money coming up? And I've had to figure that out for every single business. And it's been a journey with each one. In that intro, you kind of said, film, e-commerce, blockchain. Right now, we're deeply in the tech world. I'm in the tech world with my brother. And we're still doing some service stuff around like 3D design and animation. So there's just a lot in there where I've had to kind of learn each individual business model and how to solve its particular problems. So I'm excited to talk about how I kind of see a lot of the reason even why I'm able to do that is kind of coming from a homeschool background.
Yeah. So all your younger siblings were at Classical Conversations, but you were the oldest, so a little bit of a guinea pig, but you were homeschooled the whole way through. So, I know your mom, so I'm sure some of those ideas still translated into your education, but like you guys started an apprenticeship program and some classes to get more Christians into the tech space. So, what are some of the things that you think really helped you being homeschooled to becoming an entrepreneur? And then maybe what are some of the things you've seen in some of these students as well in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the interesting things, so right now, what you just alluded to, one of the things that we're doing, so we've had this 3D studio for since 2017, so roughly 7 years at this point. And one of the things that we've learned having the studio is called 3 Division. We've worked with Capitol Records, Amazon, American Girl, Disney, just a bunch of like really large brands. And we've done that being, Christians, very openly Christian. The people who we work with, they know that there's certain things that we just won't do. But in that process of one, even just getting to be in the room with these people, doing the work and trying to be great at doing the work, because it's not enough to just be another person just showing up. You really do need to be great at what you do, and that really makes people want to hire you, want to bring you onto things. Some of the things that we've kind of learned through this process is there really isn't anybody who's teaching the fact that this type of an industry, the one that we're in here and the one that I was in my very first foray coming right out of high school in video production, it's a freelancer's world. It's really a contract world. Everything's done on contract. And the only way that you kind of break yourself into it is by having kind of this entrepreneur skill set kind of baked into your thinking and how you're approaching your work. And so one of the things that made us want to start the cohort program that we're currently running right now, basically teaching people, we're right now very focused on the 3D side of things. We're teaching people 3D design and animation. And we're particularly offering this right now to classical conversation students because they kind of come pre-baked with some things that I think are really crucial for kind of stepping into that world. One of the biggest ones that has been important, but then the more that we've actually worked with students who didn't come from a classical conversations background, was the ability to just learn. Like it's actually a skill set to take a new subject, something that's completely foreign to you, and have the patience to be able to break it down into its parts and absorb that information. Because at first, it just feels like you're drinking through a water hose. In fact, we've run a few cohorts at this point, and some of the feedback that we got from the summer program was, man, it's a lot. Like there's a lot of information that's coming at you. And one of the things that's kind of an important skill set going into that is, all right, well, you need to kind of be okay not knowing the whole scope of everything that's coming at you. Just be okay absorbing this one point and then be good at asking questions and starting to connect those dots. That's not a thing that everybody knows how to do. It's definitely a skill set that needs to be learned and adopted kind of as you're going through the program.
Yeah, so I thought it was really neat that you guys are wanting to bring like young Christians who are, looking into get into graphics or 3D design into this space. And so you've intentionally started this accelerator cohort where, it's not for anybody can join, is my understanding, but that's not for anybody who's just like, oh, I'm going to do this an hour a day or something. Like it's something that you need to be really passionate about. What type of things were these students working on, in that first cohort? And then, there's a fall cohort. I don't know if it's, and then whenever this gets released, I'm sure there'll be a cohort after that. But like, what are some of these things they're working on and learning, and what type of student do you think would be interested in signing up for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, let me just talk real quick about the summer cohort. Basically, that was a 7-week program, and some of the feedback that we got from the program was it was a lot. And so we are setting up the fall cohorts to be 10 weeks to break up a couple of the subjects and make it a little bit more digestible. But basically, when people are coming into this, they are from the beginning getting a full foundation of the 3D pipeline. So you're starting first with, how do you just interact with the interface? We're using a free program called Blender. And it's free, but it's also like studio quality. There's been lots of studio level stuff using Blender. It's what we use in our studio. And basically the from start to finish, people are going through first how to use the interface, how to model, and how to approach designing a model. And then they go into the materials. How do you create realistic looking materials? How do you create stylistic looking materials? And then they're going into animation. And so they're getting a full picture of the pipeline. And the thing about 3D as a whole is that it is it's a complicated art form because it's pulling in a lot of different art forms. As somebody who had a film background, the film knowledge helped me when I was getting into 3D. And a lot of the different pieces around even how the application works kind of sections off all these different subjects into different buckets. So the interface itself even lends itself to being a little bit of a, here's one discipline, here's another discipline, and they have overlapping points throughout the application. So we try to break it down in a way where people, one, get the full picture of an entire workflow. And then in later cohorts, we're going to start doing some advanced stuff around specifically modeling. So when you look at the modeling workflow, there's things that we just won't have time to get into in the intro course
Sure.
that we can then get into in follow-up courses, which that'll start in the springtime. But yeah, the fall cohorts have started. In fact, the first one started today as of the time of this recording. And we've got some CC students in there, which has been really exciting. It is definitely a commitment because basically you're spending an hour per week in like class time to be able to talk through the different pieces. We run a reverse classroom because it's all run online. So you have the chance to go watch some videos, get a sense of step-by-step how to do the homework. Then you go take on the homework, which is a project. It's some type of challenge for you to take on. And then you go do the lecture, and the lecture isn't a real lecture. It's really a time for you to bring your problems to the teacher. The instructor is one of our lead artists. He's been with us for a number of years. He's worked on a lot of the projects that I had mentioned at the top. And his sense of workflow can kind of help guide the students through their very specific problems. And then his goal in that lecture time, since you've already gone through a tutorial on your own time, you've already done some project work. It's really to like grease the wheels. Okay, where are you struggling? What are the issues you're running into? And then he might present a demonstration to help try to connect the dots with some of the questions that he's seeing. Students also have the opportunity to engage. We have a community section where people can go ask questions even before the lecture time. And that space allows people to essentially get their on-the-fly problems out there. Sometimes other students come and answer the questions because they maybe understood it or saw it from a different perspective. We also are now, we keep that space open for students after the fact. So they're actually able to learn from past students who've gone through the training because those students are now helping to answer questions.
Oh, that's cool. I love how you guys are, I think, almost solving two problems. One, getting more Christians into the industry, and 3D modeling and graphics is still, it's pretty cutting edge. I have a local friend that does videography and does, pretty high level work, and they've started doing 3D stuff a few years ago and just figuring all that out. So you definitely have an opportunity to bring Christianity into an area where it's been lacking. And, a lot of us complain about how there's no good Christian media or movies or anything like that. Well, hey, we got to solve the problem by, getting our best people in early and getting them excited about it and being the leaders in there. But it's also solving a second problem, which is there's not a lot of people who know how to do this. And you guys are always looking for employees. I can imagine, at least I know the other person paid them pretty well if they were, fully certified and knew how to do all those things. So talk to me a little bit about like what type of student would be interested in this? Like if they're like, is it just for people who want to do it as a career, or is it people who might want to just like, hey, I want to do this as a hobby, or hey, I'm thinking about this as a career. I don't want to go spend $250,000 at college and then realize I don't want to do it. So this is a way to seeing if I'm interested in it. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you're hoping to accomplish with these apprenticeships and these classes and cohorts.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said, I didn't go to college. I actually did some community college classes. That got me access to like video gear and stuff like that. It also got me some exposure to like, different programs or whatever that I was trying to engage with, meet some people. But for the most part, like from the get-go, there's always been a little bit of a gap between what colleges are offering and what we really feel the need is. So there are going to be students. Here's kind of the list of students that I think are going to come to this program and have come to this program. But I think that the trend I'm seeing is it is for people who they do want to pursue this as a career, and they could have any degree of confidence in that. So it could be somebody who does not know whether or not they want to do this as a career, but they're open to that opportunity, or they're really sure they want to do this as a career, in which case, yeah, definitely come join this. This is definitely for you. The person who is on the fence, the reason why I think this is important, and you don't see this in other, this is where I think the college route is somewhat lacking, particularly for more skill set oriented stuff. Like, this is kind of creative. It's a thing that you need to have, essentially build your skill set up in to be able to be good at it. Where colleges seem to lack is essentially you're making a very, very big and expensive commitment to be fully committed to a path. It's really important, I think, to try out that path, try out whether or not your brain works in this way, or if this is a thing that you are going to really latch on to. Some people, they might come into 3D and be like, yeah, like that was fun or whatever, but like, I can't imagine doing this as a career. To me, it might seem too complicated, or, my brain thinks a different way or whatever. Or they might just find out, especially engaging with somebody who's working full time as a professional in this industry, which is who your teacher is. They might find out in talking to that person, this is not really, I don't want to have that work-life balance, or I don't want to have that type of a work, right? Like, there's all kinds of industries. I actually learned that from early on. I actually thought I might want to be a teacher. And so I shadowed the teachers that I had in high school. And it was in shadowing them that I realized, I don't want to be a teacher. Because my teachers were starting to say, as I sat with them, I heard them say the exact same things that they said to me, several years ago. And I was like, okay, I definitely don't want to go down that path, because I can't regurgitate information over and over and over again, the same exact way, to the same exact people. Like, I want to say a thing and be able to like move on. So I realized this is going to be too repetitive for me. I want to be in a different environment. Funny enough, I am a teacher.
Now doing different things. I was going to say, I had a similar experience in high school. I thought I wanted to be a computer programmer. And so I found an internship with a computer programming company, and I very quickly realized that I did not want to become a computer programmer. Now, I worked there for almost 3 years. It was a great experience. I was able to save a lot of money up for college and do things because it was a pretty rewarding. And I did find out that I didn't like engineering. I just didn't like that specific like area of computer science and computer engineering and programming. So sometimes taking a class like this or a cohort like this, you can learn valuable skills, but more importantly, you gain 4 years of your life back that you might have just wasted.
Yes, absolutely. It's the time, and it's the money, and it's also just the clarity of what this skill is actually bringing you, which is why we sectioned off the intro course from everything else. So we started first with this to essentially be a home base. So a person could get a full picture of what 3D looks like, and what it looks like to be a designer. And then later, as we add on the different specializations, that's where people are going to develop deeper knowledge into those different things. But it's not important for somebody to invest any money or time into the deeper stuff if at the beginning, at the door, they recognize, this isn't really for me.
Hey everyone, I want you to know about our newest Copper Lodge Library book, English Epic Poetry. English Epic Poetry is a collection with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the Canterbury Tales, selections from Paradise Lost, and it introduces them with historical context, tips for reading epic poetry, as well as footnotes that will help you while reading the text. You know that sometimes we think about, how can this text be Christian? What does it tell about the relationship we have with Christ? And even in less overtly religious poems like Sir Gawain and the Canterbury Tales, we find Christian themes like courage, forgiveness, and the right use of power. And so go today to copperlodgelibrary.com to see the entire epic collection of books that we have, including the newest one, English Epic Poetry. So go to copperlodgelibrary.com today or the classicalconversationsbooks.com website to make your purchase. Now back to the show. Now, where do you see 3D going? Because like obviously you've had like movies like Avatar, and there's been some different movies that have come out, maybe like one per year or two per year that have 3D things. Yeah. And then of course you've got, of course AI is starting to get big, and I imagine that that's going to be something that eventually you guys are going to dive into, or maybe already diving into. But like as a consumer, when should I expect these 3D experiences to be more normalized in my everyday life?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is it's so where 3D intersects with, everybody else consuming it is actually pretty deep. So things that are using 3D right now, because I'm going to broaden it a little bit. You have entertainment, which is what I get really excited about, especially being from film. And also, I have a relationship with the game studio. I'm trying to get some stuff made. And so between those two industries, you have film and gaming. That's a massive industry right there. There's tons and tons of game content that's being made. Indie game developers arguably make more money than indie filmmakers. I've touched both, and a video game, someone's willing to pay like, for an indie game, you'd be willing to pay like $30 for an indie game. A higher level game, you might pay like 60 or $70. But what you'd be willing to pay for a movie is like, basically nothing. Like nobody wants to spend money on movies. So just as a mental image of what people believe a product is, just at that, there's a differentiation in the opportunities available, but also there is lots of opportunity in both those fields. So there's the entertainment sector, but then like our 3D studio, we have a little bit of a touch in the entertainment sector. We also have a pretty big touch in other industries that are attached to that. So we do 3D design and animation for event visualization. So all those companies I mentioned, they throw events, year round.
They want to see it
those
events
events
on the computer,
right
out there wanting to do.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
$1,000 on some display.
Exactly. And that's one. And previs, like the pre-visualization world, is bigger than that. There's pre-visualization on architecture, pre-visualization on products, pre-visualization on massive development projects. There's a lot of different things that people use that for. And then it's also used in
Lowe's, and they have these things now where you can take a picture of your room almost, and you can put the furniture or whatever in your room, that type of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. That VR experience, but that's for the consumer. Like the developers of the products themselves already made 3D images to be able to get the first versions to get the actual product made. And then those 3D images might get used in the VR or the AR setup. They might get used in other places too. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for how you can then apply these skills that are even outside of entertainment. Now, I do think that my personal mission, and Lex's personal mission as well, is we really do think that there's a lot of opportunity for Christians to get into entertainment and get into media, because there's great stories to be told, great products to be made in the way of games. And it's bigger than just Hollywood. It's bigger than just the bigger game studios. If you go on to my son, he's like 6, and he'll watch YouTube, like kids YouTube. And there are these YouTube creators who they have millions and millions and millions of views, basically making their version of kids television. And they'll use like 3D animation to make these little kid shows. And their ability, one, to monetize that is pretty cool, because now there's the opportunity to do that. There's never really been that opportunity before. But then two, they have the opportunity to reach kids and reach people in a very influential way that I think it's dangerous for us to overlook that as a means to be able to spread the gospel and expand the kingdom. So for me personally, it's avenues like that where I want to see Christians step in, take advantage of these opportunities. Like, don't just let the if anybody knows who Blippi is, or anybody knows who any of these other creators are, don't just let those guys. Yeah, don't just let those guys have it, because there is just so much influence to be had, and it really comes down to are the Christians not just there, because that's just step one. Step two is be good, like actually be good at what you're doing. And so our goal is to not just be the best Christian studio, but to be the best studio and be a bunch of Christians.
Well, for a second there, I was thinking that you've moved beyond Christian nationalism into creating the Christian matrix, and you were just going to force us all to be in this 3D world.
That's funny. Well, to me personally, the beauty of the symbology there is you don't necessarily know when you're in the matrix, and the matrix gets to dominate your entire worldview. I think that Christians don't show up enough to be, an influencer of the current prevalent worldview. We think we are, but oftentimes it's under this guise of like, yeah, we're going to be the Christian version of something that's currently in culture, rather than just letting it be, hey, this is culture. This is our culture. This is truth. And we're going to let this come shine out of the things that we're doing. That's what Tolkien did. That's what C.S. Lewis did. A lot of the great creators all throughout history, into the Renaissance and even to today, because I think there's still plenty of great creators right now who are working like that. That's how they're thinking. They're thinking, how can I essentially just present worldview as a piece, an inherent part of my very good art?
Yeah. Well, we just got through with the 2024 Olympics, and I think about like running track, and it's almost like, the atheists and the Mormons and all these different groups are running, and we're on the same track as they are, but they've already crossed the finish line, and we're just getting out of the blocks, and we really got to switch that up for Christians. And I know one of the things y'all have in the pipeline is this Passage, which is kind of like Zoom, but a 3D version of Zoom where people can get together and have meetings and stuff like that. Am I explaining that correctly?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, basically, so if you think about what we're even doing right now we have a one-to-one experience. But if you were to meet in person, let's say just even a CC group meeting together in person, it is a many-to-many experience. So at any point in time, one person in that experience can look around and talk to anybody else and have their own conversation. If I'm on Zoom or I'm in a video call like this, the video call is either a one-to-one experience or a one-to-many experience. So if one person is talking, nobody else can be talking. Otherwise, it ruins the whole experience. What we create with Passage, and what we also, we actually, if you join a cohort, one of the 3D cohorts, part of it is actually going into Passage, because it's a great environment for learning, especially learning 3D, because we can basically bring you into a 3D world. You are in a video call in a 3D world, if you can imagine that. If you can't imagine that, you can go to passage.io and you'll see videos there of what that looks like. But basically, you're in this 3D world and you can look around at different objects. You and then somebody else can walk away from the group and have a conversation. You can also like interact and engage in ways that are only available to the many to many experience that you have in real life. And that's just a thing that digital has never been able to do, because the only thing that we have solved for to this point is the video call. It's the one-to-one or one-to-many experience where I can basically at least communicate and then show myself while I'm communicating. We're solving for something different. We want to create real experiences for people. The whole reason we even started that actually was we started that before the cohorts. And one of the biggest things with the cohorts has been, hey, this is a really great application for us to show how learning in a 3D environment, especially learning our art form of 3D, is a superior way to engage with the material.
Nice. Well, we talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency. We have a crypto segment here. I know you're in here. So being more into the tech space than I am, I mean, there's crypto, which, people see Doge and Shiba and Bitcoin and all those things, but that's kind of some artificial top layer stuff. I mean, the cool thing is the technology behind it. And so I was just wondering if you can talk, because I know you guys are in that space a little bit, like what does that technology, how does that differ from what's Web 2.0? And like, what do you see as, every technology has good applications and bad applications. Gambling on crypto, which crypto is going to go up next, isn't always a best application of it. But below it, you're actually seeing the development of something that could be cool. So maybe for our non-tech minds, maybe just talk about blockchain and what that technology is and what value it can bring compared to what we currently use.
Yeah. So the distinction between the two, cryptocurrency is just an application of blockchain. What blockchain is basically saying, hey, if you're a private company and you have your files online, they're hosted on a private server. If I'm engaging with the internet, I'm engaging with things that are held privately. So images held privately, the text, all of that, everything is held privately on private servers. What is interesting about digital is that it's always been sort of privately held. So when we give people digital products, which has been a thing, especially over the last decade, when we offer people digital products, we're giving them something that actually they don't really ever own. Unless you physically, or unless you actually save the file on your computer, you really don't own that thing. If it's just like think about your Netflix account, all those movies you don't own. The second the subscription goes away, those go away. It's probably even more prevalent with something like Audible, where you have all these books that you've kind of purchased, but they go away the second your Audible subscription goes away. So
I didn't know that.
Well, let's say if Audible went away, those would go away because they're on Audible servers. So even if you do maintain it, and I've never played with that because personally, I love my Audible account. That's one subscription that
I got it. It goes every month. It's like, you got 3 credits. I'm like, gotta go buy some books.
That's right. That's right. So basically, the advantage of blockchain is first off that it allows you to be able to own things that are not shared on a private server. You can actually have a thing, and it is on essentially a blockchain maintained thing. So so long as that blockchain exists, that your file will exist. So there's lots of different file sharing applications that now exist because we have blockchain. The other thing is that you have essentially a public ledger. So the main innovation with blockchain is that you have this public ledger that essentially allows for trustless transactions. So basically, if I do any kind of transaction, so the most common one that people think about is exchanging money. But let me just expand that for a second. There is contracts. So if I were to engage in a contract with somebody, anybody can view the code, and anybody can view that transaction on the blockchain. So I agree to this, I sign it. You agree to this, you sign it. something will automatically happen as a part of that agreement, and we are locked into that. We don't need a lawyer to come in. We don't need any other third parties to come in, which has pretty much been the dominant experience, whether it's banking, whether it is legal. You've always had a third party come in and essentially bridge the gap of trust. This is basically taking that and saying, all right, this is sort of an automated way of doing it because we have this ledger. Anybody can review the ledger and say whether or not there was something wrong. And then you have other actors who are involved in that ecosystem who essentially just help hold people accountable. There's somewhat of a picture of the church there where, if you have not just, one siloed off church, if you have a siloed off church that's just its own church, you might end up with some accountability issues. If you have, what's the verse, where three or more gathered in my name, three strand cord is not easily broken. This idea that multiple people holding each other accountable is better as a whole than just like one siloed off group, right? Mm-hmm. So that plays out a little bit in the blockchain ecosystem. But as a Christian, something that's particularly exciting to me, and this is sort of the overlap for us, is that this actually creates the ability for things to exist that cannot be taken away by people who might not want those things to exist. So let me dig into that for a second. During the lockdowns, something that happened a lot was you had people who they were basically being wiped off of the digital landscape. Our company, one of the companies that we interact with, who we have a partnership with, is a company called Akash. They are a blockchain company, and basically they are creating essentially a compute marketplace. It's an open marketplace. Anybody can offer their compute on this marketplace, and the reason that is important, because that type of thing cannot exist without blockchain. It has to be permissionless. There's all kinds of reasons for that. But point being is the ability to have this open marketplace for compute. Compute is essentially the ability to bring things to life on the digital landscape. There were companies that, because AWS did not like what they were doing, they could shut them down by removing their access to their compute. So having a company like Akash essentially is creating unstoppable websites, unstoppable stages for people to speak on. For Passage, we are building part of our infrastructure on Akash, and we call this Unstoppable Worlds. So if you are hosting a space in Passage and you want to, you're teaching a course, you are presenting to a community, you're hosting events from people all over the world, this is allowing you to have an unstoppable stage so that if Amazon or AWS wants to cancel you, not cancelable. If we decide that we don't want to offer Passage services anymore, you could still have this as you could still have your own instance of Passage, be able to still run it. We couldn't actually shut you down. So there's a little bit of there's a couple things that are at play there, but basically the number one thing is, even we need the accountability. We shouldn't be creating the next Facebook, the next Instagram, the next TikTok, where all of a sudden we are clustering power together into one space. It's really important that when we create these platforms, we are creating something that is uncancelable even by us.
Yeah. So basically, if we're talking and it's on AWS, they can just say, oh, you don't have access to your server anymore.
Yes.
But with this service, I mean, it's basically democratizing or diversifying your servers. And like if you have a computer at home, I imagine there's probably some sort of mining operation where you can say, hey, when my computer is not being used by me personally, I'll sell you the computing power and you'll collect whatever the digital token is. And that's kind of how they refinance people. And you can decide if the electricity cost and the wear and tear on your computer is worth whatever sort of blockchain rewards they're they're giving to you.
And they use stablecoins, so you can actually they have their own tokenomics on the back end, but basically I offer my compute for let's say it's 50 cents per user hour, and I'm paid that 50 cents rather than with a small fee taken off of it, and I'm paid it in USDC, which is just a stable coin. So I don't have to worry about, well, I'm getting paid in their coin and their coin is dropping. So now all of a sudden it's no longer, economically viable for me.
Well, thank you so much. This was fascinating. I learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure those who join the cohort or try to get a job with you all will learn a lot too. It's great to hear how homeschoolers can become business owners, entrepreneurs on the cutting edge of new technology. So if a person is listening to this and is interested in, learning more about what you all are doing, either getting your services because they need some 3D graphics or something done, or they want to, join a cohort and learn how to do it themselves and see if this is a career for them, what's the best way to get a hold of you and your organizations?
Absolutely. So best place is 3division.com, and the 3 is spelled out. So THREE division.com.
All right. Well, of course, we'll have the link to that in the show notes. And as always, it's always great talking to you and your brother, and just a testament of the power of moms and dads who love their kids and make exceptional educational choices for you. And it's just a pleasure having another homeschooler on the Refining Rhetoric podcast. So as always, tune in next week. Share this episode with a friend, especially if you have students who are in high school, or have friends who have students in high school who might be interested in getting in arts or graphic design. This is a great opportunity to learn from some strong Christian men who love the Lord and who want to see them succeed. So until next time, God bless.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.